Hello, thank you for tuning in to Kaieteur Radio. I am Kevin Smith and welcome to your news at noon. These are the top stories we're tracking. International Energy Agency says to halt all new oil and gas projects, and Melinda Janke says Guyana will suffer environmentally, economically, if it does not heed advice. Meanwhile, concessions galore in secret contract. Chinese company gets waivers on all imports for self and subcontractors. Meanwhile, Guyana depends on Exxon to calculate its own fine, says former EPA director, and missing $500,000 leads to false police report. Mechanic on the run after shooting carpenter over pool's game. 4 men placed on bail. Woman remanded for forging $19.4 million in GRA checks. Meanwhile, trio found guilty in 2015 murder of Crabwood Creek man, and city moves closer to imposing stiffer penalties with new anti-littering bylaws. And man killed by police was carrying over $2 million in cash, relatives claim. Do stay tuned to stay informed. And now for the news in detail. If the world is to achieve net zero emissions by 2050, then plans for new oil and gas projects must come to a halt, and drillers must rely on existing assets from today. This blunt message was noted in a bombshell 227-page report by the International Energy Agency. The report comes as a huge shocker to many environmentalists and industry stakeholders who often branded the Paris-based organization as being sympathetic to the oil industry, oftentimes underestimating the significance of renewable energy. International lawyer Melinda Janke said that the agency has made it clear that the oil and gas sector must come to an end and is in fact coming to an end. She alluded that this has potentially grave consequences for Guyana economically and environmentally if it does not heed the clear advice that has been handed down by the Paris-based organization. In other news, the Chinese company JJ Mining Group, which acquired the largest gold mining operation in Guyana from Canadian-owned Aurora Gold Mines, enjoys waivers on all imports, not only for itself, but any subcontractor it employs as part of the operations in the Kiyuni-Mazaruni location. The generous concessions come as a result of a contract that was inked in November 2011 with AGM's original owners, Canada-based Guyana Goldfields, which sold to the Chinese company. That should be the Chinese-owned mining company a little under a year ago. The company in 2019 had begun underground mining before it announced that it was selling its operations. The feasibility study for the project was completed in January 2013 and first gold was poured in August 2015, while commercial production was achieved in January of 2016. And now let's tell you, police are now trying to locate a 34-year-old mechanic who shot a carpenter to his abdomen during an argument over a game of pools. The mechanic escaped in a white wagon motor car. The 43-year-old man was shot on Monday at a shop located in Zealat Housing Scheme, East Bank, Essequibo. Public-spirited citizens immediately rushed the injured man to the Lenora Cottage Hospital, where he was treated and admitted. Due to the severity of his injury, he was later transferred to the Georgetown Public Hospital, where he was admitted, and his condition is deemed as serious. An investigation into the incident has since been launched. In other news, the Georgetown Mayor and City Council has moved a step closer towards bringing into force new anti-littering bylaws, which will ensure higher penalties for persons caught dumping garbage in the city. During the presentation of the 2021 budget for the MNCC held at City Hall on Monday, councillors were informed of the draft of the proposed new anti-littering regulations that will soon be released for public scrutiny. Among the penalties under consideration for those caught dumping or in breach of the new anti-littering bylaws are fines starting from $70,000 and ending up at $500,000. The new proposed bylaws stipulate that the fines are to be paid to the city within 72 hours from the time notice is given. Failure to adhere to the notice shall attract an additional fine of $10,000 for every 24 hours payment remains outstanding. Further, the document says that every person who remains in default of payment or more than 72 hours commits an offense and upon summary conviction is liable to imprisonment for 6 months. And moving on, the Environmental Protection Agency last week Monday amended the Liza 1 permit for the operations in the Stabroek block, led by ExxonMobil's subsidiary ESSO, to impose fines for flaring, but the country lacks any expertise to calculate those penalties, according to the former director of the agency, Dr. Vincent Adams. He revealed that stakeholders on the new penalties lamented the state of affairs that the country has tied itself into, arguing that it would be left to ExxonMobil, the company for which the fine is put in place, to decide the amount to be paid. Should there be an infraction exceeding the allowable flaring cap beyond the permitted timeline. Adams was adamant that ExxonMobil is in fact the party that influenced the provisions of the new Liza permit in order to protect the company. And on that note, let's tell you that 2 persons were arrested on Monday after a missing $500,000 in cash led them to make a false police report. The 2 in custody have been identified as a businesswoman, a 51-year-old businesswoman, and a 33-year-old male security guard residing in Port Kaieteur Northwest District. They have since confessed to fabricating a report that they were robbed around 20 hours on Sunday of $500,000 in cash. And moving on, 4 men and a woman yesterday appeared before a city magistrate after they were charged for forging $19.4 million in Guyana Revenue Authority checks. The 4 men were placed on a $600,000 bail each, while the woman was remanded to prison. The defendants are 40-year-old Ramesh Chand Singh of Backstreet squatting area, 25-year-old Komal Ram Prasad, 24-year-old Devendra Moti Ram, and 29-year-old Anush Khan. Meanwhile, 26-year-old Sharisa Tapin has also been charged. The matter was called in the Georgetown Magistrates Court before Senior Magistrate Liron Daly. The defendants were not required to plead to the indictable charges. You're listening to Kaieteur Radio 99.1 and 99.5 FM. We will return after the break. Welcome back. Let us continue with the news. Police are now trying to locate a 34-year-old mechanic who shot a carpenter to his abdomen during an argument over a game of pools. The mechanic escaped in a white wagon motorcar. The 43-year-old man was shot on Monday at a shop located in Zeelat Housing Scheme on the east bank of Essequibo. Public-spirited citizens immediately rushed the injured man to the Lenora Cottage Hospital, where he was treated and admitted. Due to the severity of his injury, he was later transferred to the Georgetown Public Hospital, where he was admitted, and his condition is deemed as serious. An investigation into the incident has been launched. Meanwhile, 3 men on trial before Justice Joanne Barlow and a jury at the Berbice High Court were yesterday found guilty of the capital offense of murder committed on Shamir Ali Merslin, called Kazak. Merslin, a trader of Grant 1805 Weld Tank Dam, Crabwood Creek, currently in Berbice, was fatally shot to the head following a long-standing dispute with a fellow businessman, on October 24th, 2015. The guilty verdict was handed down to the 3 men, Dennis Veerasamy, Bashir Harris Knott, and Delroy Fraser, yesterday afternoon, with attorney-at-law Brandon D. Santos representing Veerasamy, while Harry Knott and Fraser were represented by attorney-at-law Chandra Sohan. In other news, the relatives of Peter Headley, the man killed by a Guyana police force rank on Saturday, claimed that he had over $2 million in cash in his possession on the night of his death, money which has not been accounted for by the Guyana police force. The dead man's father-in-law said that Headley had spent Saturday uplifting outstanding payments from business clients. Headley's in-law said that he had worked along with him selling drums through a business they co-owned at David Street Kitty. He stated that he had checked in with Headley at around 5 p.m. in the afternoon and he was notified of the funds uplifted. The man's reputed wife, Patricia Campbell, said that she learned about her husband's demise via a Facebook post. And now for your COVID-19 update. According to Worldometer, the number of worldwide coronavirus cases has reached 165.2 million, with deaths at 3.4 million and recovery cases at 144.3 million. Guyana is now seeing 15,454 total cases, with total deaths at 345, and recovery cases now stand at 13,252, while the country is currently experiencing 1,857 active cases, and seriously critical are listed as 14. And on that note, we now head over to the page 7 of the Kaieteur News, dedicated to bluntness. Guyana's economic fortunes are tied, for good or for bad, to its fledgling oil and gas industry. This means that the person who has the say in that industry's development needs to take the reality of that industry into consideration. Every meaningful indicator says that fossil fuel use is on the decline. We need an honest and clear assessment from government on what those indicators mean for this country's economic future. And with that, we've come to the end of today's News at Noon. I'm Kevin Smith. Thank you for listening.
Want value for your advertising dollar?